Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Today, I'm very excited. As many of you know that have listened to this before, I spend a lot of time in Colombia, so I'm very honored and very happy today to have a guest here recording this conversation who's also in Colombia, and Colombia is a huge part of his life, so we're going to learn more about that as we discuss it with him. We've got Bruce McLean. Bruce is the founder of BnB Colombia Tours. Bruce, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here.
Yeah,
happy to chat about anything to do with Colombia.
All right, very cool. Well, we're going to chat a lot about you because if anybody listening to this has already probably figured out you don't have the Colombian accent. So we're going to discuss more than just Colombia, but I know that Colombia is something that's very passionate for both you and I. We actually met recently at, I guess it was kind of a trade show, a Colombia travel trade show, tourism show, the Colombia, was it Nature Mart? I shouldn't have even brought it up, but it was the Colombian Nature Mart or something like that, sponsored by Pro Colombia. So we met there briefly, had a conversation. And I thought, man, this was just a conversation we need to have, and we need to hit the record button so others can enjoy it as well. So thank you so much. So with that being said, let's jump into, let's go back as far into the beginning as we need to go to help our listeners understand kind of how you got from wherever it was you were to where you are now. So I don't know how far we need to go back. How far should we go?
Well, I'm a Kiwi, so born in New Zealand. Lived in Australia for 16 odd years. I have a sister who lives in Bogota normally, and I came to visit her. I was here for about 3 months in 2009, and that's when I fell in love with Colombia. It's just an amazing
what were you
country.
doing before that? As far as, what did your world look like before you made that first trip to Colombia? And I had the same experience. I came to Colombia, thought I'd visit for a month, and here I am almost 3 years later. But I'm curious, what were you doing before that first visit to Colombia?
Basically hospitality.
Okay.
More or less. I was working or / managing cafes, restaurants, bars, doing, events, congresses, sort of thing, mice, a bit of everything, but hospitality, that side of the world.
Okay, mostly, and you'd mentioned you're Kiwi from New Zealand, but you lived in Australia, and I didn't quite catch, how long were you in Australia?
About 16 years, 17 years, I think.
All right,
that's so quite a while. I was in
significant amount of time.
It was in Sydney. It was a case of I didn't plan on staying. I left New Zealand with the idea of doing the big OE, going, country to country, just working in kitchens or whatever, doing dishes, and got on a bus after about 2 weeks. I got on a bus when I was in Sydney and saw the girlfriend of a childhood friend who said, look, we're looking for somebody to move into our house and help us pay the rent. Yep, sure, why not? And that was it. Stayed for a decade and a half. It was so good.
I heard you say the big OE, and I'm not making the connection. What is the big OE?
Overseas experience.
Okay.
The big OE is something that I was like, how old was I? About 22, I think. And the idea was to go over and experience the world. I got to Fiji, then I was going to Australia, and I was going to spend a month or so there. Then I was going to carry on up through Asia and into Europe, and that's as far as I got. Australia, that was it.
I see a pattern here, but that's cool. It's like part of you has got that ambition to go, but I think also you fall in love with places, don't you? I can sense that. Yeah. That's been my challenge because I've been doing the big OE, I guess, for the last 3 years, and two and a half years of that has been in Colombia. So I get it. That was my intention. Just keep going. And I've gone a few other places since, but I've spent a lot more time here than I thought I would. So I get that. So you said you went to Australia when you were 22. So what were you doing? Were you working in hospitality in New Zealand before you went as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first job in a restaurant, waitering, and my second job was managing a hotel restaurant. And since then, it's just been hospitality the whole time. Oh, no, I tell a lie. I went back to New Zealand for a year for a break because I thought, maybe it's time to go back home, and worked with one of my brothers labouring and doing stuff like, building a house and, fencing and all that sort of stuff, and come to understand I hate that. And so it didn't actually take me a year to understand that, but I stayed for a year, and then I like the other stuff more.
All right. I get that. So let's go back a little further. What got you into that stuff in the first place? Growing up in New Zealand, were there some family influences? I'm just curious kind of what got you go on that path, or was it completely, because a lot of people end up working in restaurants and hospitality because when they're young, it's like, well, that's what I can get a job doing. And then they either hate it or they tend to stick with it and it becomes something. So I'm curious what your story is.
My story, pretty much after high school, I got, what was it called? UE, university entrance. And all I could think is I go to university 4 years or so, sitting in front of it in a desk, and I just thought, I don't know what I want to do, but I know that I don't want a job in the future where I'm just sitting in front of a computer. That to me at that time was just like, oh, no, couldn't think of anything worse. And so I just thought, right, I just did a course, a 1-year course of the basics on hospitality. And from there, I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do now.
Bruce, how much time in each week are you now spending in front of a computer?
Exactly.
As you and I are sitting here in front of our computers, that resonated. I was like, okay. So, but it's a little
80-90%. 80-90% of my week is in front of the computer now. That's all I'm doing.
Probably looking at spreadsheets, analytics, trying to figure out marketing strategies, all that stuff. But look at all the cool stuff you did in between. And it's still related. So I don't want words in your mouth, but that's what I'm sensing. So
absolutely.
All right. Very cool. So now let's jump back to, well, I want to know this, because when you're like, I want to go have that big OE, what influenced that? Were there other people around you doing that? Or were there people in your family that either influenced you or tried to persuade you from doing it? Or what was that like?
I think it was just being from New Zealand. It's a small country, and everybody in New Zealand, when growing up, it's like, there's so much more to see in the world. We don't get to see that much in New Zealand or do that much, but so it's like most people that I knew around my age generally were going overseas. If not, most would finish university, then go away. I think it's called a gap year in a lot of countries. Go away for a year or so, find themselves, and then come back. So I was basically going to do that.
I don't know how you would know these stats, but I'm curious if you just kind of have a gut instinct of what percentage of those young Kiwis that go have that OE actually come back, as opposed to kind of like yourself end up in a totally different place.
I think most go back.
Okay.
From what I know, from the people I know, most go back. Yeah. Most will do like what I had the idea of, going and working in a kitchen, just washing dishes, staying in backpackers, just having fun, just experiencing things and just, making enough money to, pay the rent for the week sort of thing. That was the idea. I think that's what most do. And
that aligns with my experience. I was fortunate to spend several weeks traveling around in New Zealand several years ago. And I met a lot of people that had left and had obviously come back. There's still people there. So obviously, I guess the majority of them, if a lot of people do it, and there's still people there. So obviously, I guess the majority do return. But I definitely got the sense it was a very just travel friendly place. Just even in New Zealand itself, it's easy to get around. It's between the North Island, South Island, and all the different places. It's super easy to go rent a car and just go. You don't need to have, in my experience, I didn't need to have reservations ahead of time. It was just like people were just doing it. It was just a thing. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then also, I've interviewed people here on the show. I've interviewed actually a couple of Kiwis that we talked about that. One of them has been doing the digital nomad thing just in New Zealand, really for several years in the camper van, and it's definitely a culture of that. So I get that. All right, so you went to Australia, met up with some people, ended up staying 16 years, doing the hospitality. Is there anything there that's relevant to kind of what you're doing now that we should touch on before we jump to Colombia?
No, well, it's a service industry. Mm-hmm. I sort of see that. It's basically, looking at what people need and providing that service. Whether it's coming to a bar, okay, you want a beer. Restaurant, okay, this is the sort of meal, this is the sort of food you'd like. This is the wine that will go with that. It's providing that service, explaining how things, guessing or understanding what people are wanting almost before they do. Mm-hmm. It's also, I suppose, to a point, quite a bit, I suppose, is managing people as well. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot about that there. A lot about managing people, which is not an easy task or a skill, and it's something really that they should probably teach in school, because people are not easy to manage, because everybody obviously has their own lives. They all have their own feelings, their own thoughts, their own goals, their own dreams, everything like that, and it's about understanding what those people want, what they need, and balancing that with what the company needs as well, the business needs.
And as I listen to you say that, what's coming up for me is that in the tourism business, managing people is managing employees, team members, whatever you want to call them, but it's also managing clients, because it's very, very similar skill set when you've got a group of 12 people show up and you're going to spend a week with them, either guiding them or you've put together a trip for them, managing expectations. Because what you just said about everybody has their own thoughts, needs, motivations. It's really, really very similar. So I can see where, learning that just in the business standpoint, but even in hospitality, I mean, everybody you're dealing with is kind of similar. Were you doing anything that you would, I guess, call tourism in Australia? I mean, there's hospitality and tourism is so closely linked, but clearly what you're doing now is much more of a, we're on a travel and tourism podcast. So obviously what you're doing now, I kind of think fits in. I'm just curious, what was the connection, or how did you transition that, or what do you want to share about that?
Why did I get into tourism?
Yeah.
More or less. Look, what I was doing in Australia, I wouldn't say is tourism related so much. One of the business, I was mainly, I haven't said that, I was mainly in hospitality. But at one point I owned my own cafe as well. But I was also, towards the end of my time there, I was also importing products from Colombia, wooden products, wooden watches, wooden phone cases, wooden sunglasses, all handmade, some beautiful stuff that you can get in Bogota. That, and also creating some other wooden wedding invitations and other wooden stuff. So I was actually selling that to tourists as well.
Did that come up? I'm curious. I hate to interrupt you, but did that come up after your first trip to visit your sister in Colombia? Okay. All right. So
that happened after that because I also met a girl at the time.
Oh.
It's a common story here.
The word is peligroso or peligrosa.
Peligrosa.
Yeah.
But she came over to Australia in the following year to stay with me there. And we're married with, don't have kids, but we've got 4 dogs, and we both, we live here in the Coffee Zone. Absolutely love it. On one of the trips that I did with her when I was in Bogota, was going to Villa de Leyva. And, for those that don't know, 480 odd years old. It's a beautiful colonial town, beautiful wooden doors, huge wooden doors, massive stone fences, quite a romantic place, especially walking down the streets at night because of the lamps that they have on the buildings and that sort of stuff. It is like walking back in time. Mm-hmm. But there I went and found this shop that had these wooden watches, handmade wooden watches, which I absolutely loved. Paula, my wife-to-be, remembered that, got in contact with this shop, and bought 2 for me from them and brought them over to New Zealand. And it was just a case of talking to these people who are manufacturing these and talking to them about what else that they can do and what else that they can do. And then that's how that started. And then I was like, we've got to share this. People love this sort of stuff. Brought it over to Australia and found that more tourists bought it than Australians. But that's how it is.
So what was it? What do you think it was? I'm sure the craftsmanship, I'm sure it's a unique product, but do you think the fact that it came from Colombia resonated with people? Because I'm imagining tourists visiting Australia and saying, oh, look at this watch or this, whatever it is, made in Colombia. I need to have this. What do you think was behind that?
I think a lot of tourists, for me, people who travel are more interested in things that are authentic or things that are artisan or things that are handmade.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here in Colombia, most of what I sell is authentic tours, artisan tours. You meet the family who have, owned a coffee farm for, 70 odd years. You burn your fingers taking off the husk off cacao, of cacao beans when you're after roasting them, authentic stuff. That's what I sort of think. The handmade sort of thing, authentic stuff is what people who travel like. They enjoy that sort of thing. If they just want, not everybody, but if they just want, nice stuff, they can get that in a shopping centre in their own town, which is generally just made in China. But, having something that's handmade, it gives so much value to a product. Not as much now, I find, as what it did then. Like now, my wife actually makes handmade bags, leather bags, I should say. She's an extremely talented person and can do basically anything with her hands with, leather and wood and everything, really.
Mm-hmm.
But, so she'll be able to sell those much easier before, because, she's artisan. It takes like 2 or 3 days to make one. And so before she'd sell it very easily or quite easily. Now, not as much, because they can get it from China looking just as good for a quarter of the price.
Yeah.
So it hasn't got the same value. But before, definitely handmade products.
Do you think in your experience in Australia selling these Colombian products, did people but I guess I'm curious, okay, it's handmade, it's artisan. I get that. I hear everything you're saying there. And was there some excitement about was the typical tourist who would buy it say, oh my gosh, I love that. I've been to Colombia. I've got a connection with Colombia. Or did it matter at all that it was from Colombia?
Most hadn't gone to Colombia.
Okay.
Like Colombia now, it's a boom for tourism. It started pretty much when I got here, more or less, not because of me, but because of, I would say most at that time thought of Colombia, Pablo Escobar. Yeah. And obviously Netflix doesn't help in that matter. But having said that, it's because of him that Colombia got on the map, and it's because of him, in the 80s into the 90s, that's when, Colombia got really known. Shortly after that, or at that time, is when backpackers started coming here, because, young people want an adventure. A lot of them would have thought that Pablo's cool, even though he's a mass murderer, killed over 3,000 people, including a plane load of people and babies. Anyway, but because of them coming here in those 90s more and early 2000s, then those people grow up and they're now in their 40s and 50s. And they have been able to, it's not that bad. I was there when I was young. I'd like to go back again, see these other places. And they can tell other people who didn't go, so that's how I see how the progression and things have happened with Colombia. But at that time, selling in Sydney, no, everybody was like, Colombia, wow, has it got any cocaine in it? Yeah, of course it has.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, I brought that just to sell the wooden boxes. Yeah. But anyway.
It's an interesting place with an interesting history. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on it, because that's one I hadn't really thought about. And because there's obviously a lot of very negative things that went along with Pablo Escobar. And but what came up for me as I was thinking, a place like Vietnam, for example, is there's a lot of Americans that are going to Vietnam right now. It's a kind of a popular spot, and you almost wonder if nothing had ever happened there in Vietnam, would people even know about it? Because it's a relatively small country and a place that's kind of hard to get to. And so anyway, that's just interesting that you brought that up. Okay, so you came. Tell us more. Tell us more of the story.
More of the story. The 3 months that I was here, just as I said, fell in love with it. I got to the Amazon, loved my time there. Went to Buenaventura and the Pacific Coast, not during whale season, but it was still fantastic. Loved it. Shouldn't have actually gone at that time because it was quite a dodgy time, but, I was young, not the most intelligent at that time either.
Is there a story there, Bruce? I don't want to skip past this. It sounds like there's a story there. Do you want?
No,
Are you interested in sharing that?
No, it was
when
just
anybody says I shouldn't have went, it was dodgy. I feel like, okay, tell us the story.
Well, not everywhere in Colombia is safe to go.
Mm-hmm.
There are paramilitary, there are FARC, or there were FARC, now the FARC dissidents. There are different illegal armed groups in different areas. Buenaventura is one of the most corrupt ports in the world, but it's where a lot of merchandise comes in of Colombia, mainly from China, realistically, unfortunately, as is most of the world. But there, because obviously where there's corruption, then there's unsavory people, and where there's a port in Colombia, that means product can go out, whether it's cocaine or marijuana or people smuggling as well, and guns can come in. So it's an area that over the years has been, it's a lot safer now, I should say. Mention that. It's a lot safer now. There's been a piece there for, I would say, almost a year, I think, where it's quite safe, and we can actually send people there. They've got a hotel that I like to send people there to now called Estacion, which is a really nice hotel. It's got over 100 years old. So shout out to them if they're listening to give them a free plug. But at that time, it was some pirates, I suppose you could say, who would stop boats going from one point to another point and basically just rob the people. And that happened just a couple of weeks before I went there. And so it was they robbed a good 20, 30 odd people who were on a boat going on a tour to one place. And I happened to go the same route, which, not the smartest, but, but I was with other people who I put faith in because they'd lived in Colombia for a year or two or more. So, but obviously I shouldn't have put faith in those people. But nothing bad happened. It was fine. Everything was good. Went there, had a great time.
Where oftentimes you go somewhere and you might hear, oh, you should have been here 2 weeks ago. The whales were breaching, or the this or the that. And this is the case. Well, it's a good thing you weren't here 2 weeks ago. So, but that kind of creates a little bit more adrenaline maybe when you're there. I remember going on a fishing trip in Canada, and this guide, pretty much everywhere we walked, it was a walk-in trip to this place to fish, and he was saying, hey bear, the whole time, and explaining to us that there's a lot of bears here, and that if the bear hears you, then we don't want to surprise them. So he would just be talking to the bears to alert the bears. And I thought afterwards, that was really adrenaline packed. It was like exciting. It was like, we were adrenaline pumping through our veins at the end of the day. When we got back, we were exhausted. We'd had an amazing day. And I was like, man, that's pretty good guide technique, even if there's no bears there.
Yeah.
He created a level of excitement in us that we wouldn't have had, I mean, I know the area. I grew up in the Rocky Mountains. I know there's bears, but if somebody didn't know any different, they would still have an exciting trip. So I wonder, like, oh, watch out. We're watching for the pirates because 2 weeks ago, but it's not really a joke because it's a serious thing that Colombia's gone through. But at the same time, it definitely it left a memorable experience for you. So now, after sharing that story, let's talk about how do you deal with the perceptions that people have about Colombia? Because you just said there's places that are dangerous. Not all Colombia is safe. And you're in the business of helping people arrange tours. You're in the business of helping people make choices about what areas to go to, what places to see, places to stay, things to see. So somebody that's listening to this, that's thinking about going to Colombia, that maybe is thinking, I'll just do it myself because the internet is amazing. Or is that a good idea? Or is it really important to speak with someone like yourself what do you tell people? Because if I'm going to New Zealand, I don't feel like I need to speak to anybody realistically.
No, New Zealand. You can find everything online.
I can find everything online. I don't need that at all. But Colombia is a little different. Latin America is a little different.
It is. Look, if you can speak Spanish, you can do it. You don't need my help. You can find all the information you need online. All that I'd say is just be aware of the situation, who's around you, and don't use a bus. That simple, really. Oh, don't rent a car either, actually. Don't do that. Don't rent a car. Driving here is a different experience.
Okay, don't rent a car. Don't take a bus. What does that leave us?
You can use transport operators, I suppose. You can book hotels. Book the hotels yourself. Many hotels will be able to give you details on tours. a lot of hotels who actually get commission themselves based on the tours that they recommend anyway. They're not always at the highest level, but then again, it's going to depend on what you're paying, what your budget is. Obviously, if you want to do it yourself, generally your budget's not that good. I don't want to sound negative like that. It's not that good. It's your budget isn't adequate enough.
That's usually my case. I do a lot of do-it-yourself stuff, and that's pretty much the reason. So I get it.
Exactly. I know a lot of people go and say they're doing it to, go at their own pace and all that sort of stuff, which I'm happy. Yeah, it's great. If you can go at your own pace, fantastic. But if you want to use the services of somebody who's going to be there 24/7, available to make sure your transport's going to be there, your guide's going to be there, plan your hotels, work out exactly the best method for you to get from point A to point B, what you're going to see at this time of year, go to there for the wildlife at this time of year, or here bird watching, or, here for the whales, or, monkeys, or, if it's a culture you want, if you want to go for a festival, then you need to pay for something, or talk to somebody and then pay for their services. But if you are on a tight budget, if you can speak Spanish, great, you'll be fine. Just book your accommodation and see, and through the hotels, you should be able to get some okay experiences. It won't necessarily be the best experience for your 2 weeks or 3 or month or whatever, or how much time you have here, but it's still going to be good.
I think also you mentioned, if you can speak Spanish, and maybe if you're trying to, save some money, you can do it. You can do a lot of stuff on your own. And I've also noticed, just by being around here so much, there's so much information, and I'm going to say contradictory information. So I think in order to really do it, you got to really invest a fair amount of time and just recognize that you're going to read, one person's going to say, this place is incredibly dangerous, you should not go there. And then you're going to find another article that's like, this is the hidden gem of Antioquia or whatever, and it's amazing, and nobody knows about it, and everybody's so friendly. So that's the biggest challenge. Like, okay, I speak Spanish, I am comfortable booking hotels by myself, but there's so much contradictory information. You can spend hours and hours and hours, or I see in the Facebook groups every day, in the Colombia expat groups, or the digital nomad groups, or whatever groups, there's somebody coming in. I read this, I heard this. What do you think? And then you get 150 responses that are all completely different. So I think time is something as well, that if you're listening to this, if you don't have a lot, if you don't have a lot of time, that's another reason really to connect with somebody like you, Bruce, or there's some great resources out there to just kind of cut through that. And also, things change. You literally just said Bonaventura. I'm saying it right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's good now for a year, I think is what you said. I heard you say a year. Yeah. So the point there is things change a lot. So if you're reading an article, post that was 2 years old, a 2-year-old blog post normally is pretty, you're going to think, oh, that's pretty recent. If you're reading about technology, even technology, 2 years isn't that old. But when we're in a culture like this, the things change frequently. I think, what do you think?
I agree completely. Look, there are some places in Colombia where we take people, which I've always taken people. Some places where weren't so safe to go to, then it became safe, and now I'm like, look, I'll book everything, make sure, but if it gets to the point where even if it's the day before and I don't think it's safe, you won't be going.
That's another good point of
which has happened. Unfortunately,
having someone like you there.
Yeah, it happened to us a couple of years ago, or a year ago, where there was a couple of two different groups ended up going to the same destination, and we couldn't take them there just because it was like within a couple of weeks it had become unsafe. It was just really annoying. Really,
I've noticed that even just being here. I've been around quite a bit, but most of my time is in Medellin, and every once in a while something will happen up in the hills, and they're like, okay, don't go to these pueblos right now. You don't want to be there. And they're popular places. They're easy places to get to. It's very easy to hop on a bus and go to one of these pueblos. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on, you could show up there and be like, oh, what am I doing here? But also I've noticed that most Colombians have very strong opinions about safety that may not necessarily be based on current events, because there's kind of some generational stuff that's happened here. I do take buses. I'm pretty adventurous, and don't have a lot of money to pay people to drive me around. I do take buses quite often, but even in the city, sometimes in some of the, I was in Bucaramanga not too long ago, and did a big loop, Barranquilla, and I'm in some of these places, and I'll ask people, where's the bus to go wherever? And 90% of the time they look at me and say, don't take a bus. It's not safe. Don't you have Uber on your phone? And then, but they'll get on the bus, but they look at me and
yeah.
You should be taking an Uber. You have no business being on the bus.
Yeah.
But then also I do take buses a lot. I'm mostly in the cities. I have been fortunate. I have not seen any issues, and I kind of enjoy the experience. But you mentioned don't take buses. So I want to circle back to that and take advantage of the fact that I've got you you've been in Colombia longer than I have. You've got more experience. So what should I know about buses that may not be so obvious?
Light-fingered people, basically.
Okay.
Generally, Colombia's a place where, if you're going to get robbed, they want to do it without you knowing. It's extremely unlikely that, unless you're at the wrong place, wrong time, or how do I word it? I always advise everybody to be aware of the situation around you. But there's also a lot of common sense. If it's a dark alley or dark street, don't walk down it. Mm-hmm. Quite simple, just common sense. If it's an opportunity there for somebody to rob you, they may or there might not be anybody there. Mm-hmm. So don't give the opportunity. On a bus, Colombians are smaller people than most people, Europeans, I should say, or, mm-hmm. normal people. Because, obviously, indigenous influence there, so smaller.
Sure.
So, bus seats are smaller. Everything's a little bit smaller. It's a bit more compact. It's not necessarily most comfortable, which does give easy opportunity for those people with light fingers to be able to go and put an arm around you, into their bag, into, from under the seat or behind the seat or whatever, that sort of thing. So it's not, it's that sort of thing. And being a foreigner, you're straight away a target, for that sort of stuff. It's a simple thing. Same reason that we tell all of our travelers, when you're out, you're not going to be going out with your passport. You've got a photocopy of your passport. Your passport's staying in your hotel room. You're going to come over, bring over 2 credit cards, 2 debit cards, leave 1 set in the hotel room, just in case, worst case scenario, you might lose a wallet.
Mm-hmm. That's all. I think one thing on the bus and being a target, it's interesting because when I first came here, I had a close friend she's like, do not use your phone on the bus. She didn't think I should get on a bus at all, but she's like, do not use your phone on the bus. Do not use your phone on the metro. But, I get on the bus and everybody has their phone out. So it's very easy to fall into that. Okay, it's completely safe. Obviously, they're using their phones. I can use my phone. But my phone is probably more likely to be a bigger reward for somebody that does want to try and take it, because I'm more likely probably to have, the Apple phone, as opposed to a lot of locals are using, different types of phones. And there's that. And if they do take something out of my pocket, if they get a wallet, there's more likely to be credit cards in there, or things like that the typical person on the bus is probably has 20 or 30 mil in their pocket, if that, and have a fairly inexpensive phone that works for them. Great. And I would suggest anybody that's going to spend a lot of time here might as well just get one of those phones. I know when my phone dies or disappears, I'm going to go get the same phone everybody else here has, because they work. But, and the other thing is, the way the bus drivers drive, it's a bouncy, bumpy ride.
Exactly.
And if you're thinking, where might I have the opportunity to accidentally bump into somebody and take something out of their pocket, it would be on a bus.
It's easy. Yeah.
Because every 2 or 3 minutes, the bus driver's slamming on the brakes and everybody's bouncing into each other, or on the metro when the door's getting ready to close and there's still 14 people outside the door trying to get in. There's a lot of bumping and grinding going on. So, it's okay.
When you're packed in there like sardines, that's easy. Easy. And you got to remember, your phone will pay for the food and everything for their family for a month or 2. It's just how it is.
Yeah, because the what they call the minimum wage here, and I don't know, you probably know it better than I do, but it's somewhere around $300 a month, right?
It would be about $350.
Yeah, and I think that's they call that the minimum wage, but I've also heard that kind of referred to as that's the wage or the average wage. Because we can think minimum, minimum wage is $300 a month, but I'm sure the only people, young people working in restaurants are making minimum wage. But here it's, 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-olds, they're working 6 days a week, busting their butts off, and they've been doing that job for a long time. And they're still making pretty much the same thing. So it's a little different here. So when you hear 300 is the minimum wage, I don't want anybody listening to this to think, oh, well, that's just the beginning wage, because a lot of people continue that. I've met accountants that, educated accountants that are making maybe $500 a month after, years doing the work. So it's an interesting thing. That's a whole nother conversation, but the people are great, aren't they? I mean, I just love the people. That's why let's touch on the positives. You married a Colombian, you've got a team, and a business working with a lot of Colombians. So what is it that people should know about the Colombian culture and personality, or just people that they might not recognize if is all they know is Pablo Escobar and what we just discussed about people stealing stuff on the bus?
It is an extremely friendly place. Very helpful. It doesn't really, with the exception of Bogota. But it's, Bogota's high altitude, it's cold. Nobody's happy when it's cold, and it's traffic's horrible. For me, any place that's got a lot of traffic and it's cold, people aren't going to be happy.
Yeah.
So they're not like friendly, happy sort of people in Bogota. Everywhere else, they're friendly, happy, helpful. If you're on the street, look lost, they will stop and ask if you need help. They will, it's the sort of people that they will get out a piece of paper or to draw a map or actually walk with you to where you're going.
Yeah.
That is what Colombians are. And the coffee zone where I live, it is the friendliest place in Colombia as well. But everywhere, you can get help. Anybody, everywhere in Colombia. If you need help, even though we're talking about the bad things in Colombia, but it's the 1%ers. It's not the 99% of the people. Most are extremely nice, extremely friendly, extremely honest, hardworking. They want to help you. They want to promote Colombia. They want everything to go well for you, your family, everybody. It's just how it is.
The first question people usually ask me is, what do you think of Colombia? And I say, oh my gosh, I love it. It's my favorite place in the world. And their eyes just light up. They're so proud. And they'll just say, oh, I'm so happy to hear that you love my country.
Exactly.
And they love their country. And even when they're like, maybe they have ideas of maybe going to the US or finding other places they can, go and earn some money, they want to come back,
Exactly.
It's not because they don't love Colombia. They are just so excited about it. And here in your region as well, for our listeners, anybody from this region, the kind of the Andes coffee region around, not all of the Andes, but around Medellin anyway, people from the areas called, are known as paisas. And I always people ask me, where are you from? And I say, I'm paisa, soy paisa. Soy paisa de Estados Unidos means I'm a paisa from the United States. But in my corazón, soy paisa. And they just light up. They just think that's so cool that I identify with that. And you mentioned people, giving you directions or helping you find places. It's amazing. Like there've been so many times that I'm lost and I ask somebody for a bus stop, for example, even though they're trying to talk me out of getting on the bus, they will walk me to the bus stop. Very seldom do they, just like, oh, it's that way. Sometimes people point in a direction. Well, it's over there, over there. But normally they'll just walk me. Come on, let's go. And sometimes I think, oh, it's probably on the street corner. Isn't that nice? They got to walk me to the corner because they think I can't find it on my own. And then like 5 minutes later, we're still walking.
Yeah.
And if I didn't know better, I'd think, where are they taking me? This is a little sketchy. But then eventually we get to the bus stop and then they'll sit and wait with me to make sure I get on the right bus. That's so cool.
That's how they are.
Yeah, I've been to 30 some countries. It's why when I came here, I thought I'd stay a month, and why I'm still here. Or if you drop something, I'm pretty sure that if you were just a social experiment, if you walk down the street here and drop some cash on the ground, I think somebody's more likely to stop you and say something than they would be pretty much anywhere in the US. And I'm not knocking the US. It's just in my experience. I remember, back home, it was common to, you'd go have coffee somewhere. I used to go to coffee with my grandparents, and they'd always leave a few coins on the table as a tip. I remember the first time I left some coins on the table here in a panaderia, which is basically a coffee shop, and the lady chased me out on the street, "Senor, senor," because I left money on the table. I was like blown away. So anyway, let's chat a little bit more about your business. I want to make sure anybody that's listening to this really kind of has an understanding of what BnB Colombia Tours does, what you don't do, and how you might be able to support them, or just really anything you want to discuss about the business.
Okay, what we do. We do custom packages, whether it's called fit tours, but basically we customize a tour for one person up to 12, more or less. Whether it's a single traveler, couples, families, multi-generational families, and going to different locations. Basically, we only take people to the safe locations. If it's not safe to go, we just don't take people there. Quite simple. Whether it be the Amazon, if they want, nature, hiking, if they want to go in wildlife in Casanare, then it's the most spectacular wildlife location for me. It's wonderful. If they want, history and 12,000-year-old rock paintings, we've got Guaviare, San Agustin for pre-Colombia tombs and statues and sculptures. There's, Casanare. I've already said Casanare. I mean Guaviare, Guajira, for so much indigenous culture up there, and Santa Marta, and the beauty of the Caribbean, Cartagena. There's just there's so much. There's so many locations.
Does the typical person that reaches out to you, do they have kind of an idea of where they want to go, or is it like, I want to go to Colombia and I have no idea?
Most people think they have an idea.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Like I have a form on my website for people to complete, which is, do you know what destination you like to go to? And then below that is what sort of experiences you like to go to. Generally, it's the experiences that we focus on, and we talk to them about what experiences they want. Do they want beaches? Do they want wildlife? Do they want hiking? Do they want sun, heat? What is it that you want to do? Then we tell them, okay, this is where we can take you. This place, this place, this place. How much time have you got? That. Okay, so we've got to cut out a few things and work out the best way to maximize your time here. Generally it's a case of you can't see everything in one time, because it's going to take you a good 6 months. So it's a case of finding the things to go and see in your couple of weeks or whatever time you have this year. Work out a plan for following year or 2 years or 3 years later, and then we can go again. But it's always a case of maximizing their time depending on what time of year they're coming as well. That affects things a lot also, obviously.
I know you've got different types of travelers, but I'm also curious, what's the average length of time? When you say how much time do you have, what's your average response?
Depends where they're coming from. If they're coming from Europe, we're looking 2-3 weeks, up to 4. Coming from the US, generally less than 2 weeks, 9 to 12 days. It depends. A lot of people will try to come on, they'll leave on a Friday. So they've got that weekend, they've got the full week, and then they've got the next weekend as well. So they might only take, so they'll be taking a week's holiday plus another day or two, trying to work it out with the public holidays that they have over there. So it depends where they're coming from. Probably on average, most of our clientele are from the US. So, if it's a multi-generational family, around 12 days to 14. If it's retirees or people over 50, which is most of my clientele realistically are over 50, so they've got that extra cash and they can take that extra time, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks sort of thing. They really get to spend their time, enjoy the destinations. Because if you don't have a lot of time, you're rushed. I recommend, strongly recommend to do it, minimum 3, if not 4 days in any destination. You lose half a day getting there, half a day leaving. So you want to have a couple of days to really enjoy a location. Otherwise, what you're doing, you're just coming, rushing, doing everything, taking photos, and then you're going to enjoy the destination a month later when you're going through your phone. It's not the way. Well, it's not the way I like to travel, but we do have travelers who like that. So,
well, I suspect it's almost a cultural thing, because one of the things definitely about Colombia is things move slower, which I think is a good thing. And if you're coming from the US with that mindset, I want to see as many things as I possibly can in the shortest amount of time. I actually think that would be incredibly frustrating for a lot of people because I go to the mall and I've been traveling for 3 years, most of that here. And I still get frustrated because if I'm in a hurry, if I'm like, I need to go get this, and that, the lines are slow. The people just move at a different pace. And that's good. So I would invite people that are thinking about coming here, just accept that. And I'm not saying that everything's going to be late and your drivers are going to be late. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying the culture just moves slower. And I think you'll enjoy it a lot more if you can just slow down. If you're always like, okay, we got to go to the next place. We got to go to the next place. We got to go to the next place. You might get frustrated with your driver.
You just can't do it. Yeah, exactly.
Or your guide or whatever, because your guide's like, oh, wait, we got to go see this. We got to go see that. And accept that. That's beautiful. That gives you the opportunity to see things that you wouldn't have otherwise seen, and you show up and tell your guide, hey, we only have 4 hours and then we got to be on the other side of the valley. You're going to miss things if so.
Exactly. The guides know the timing. They know when we need to be at certain places for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You just can't force things here at all, really, whether it be time or anything. You can't.
Anything.
Anything. You can't. No.
It is what it is. And you just the more you can just accept, oh, well, I came here because I wanted to see the culture. So embrace the culture. It just is what it is. If you ask for, a lemon lime soda, I had this experience not too long ago. I was like, I could see the bottle. It looked kind of like 7-Up. And I was like, is that, gaseosa de limon, or, lemon soda or something like that? And she's like, no, I don't have it. I don't have lemonade or whatever. And I'm like, well, what is that? And I pointed right at it. She said, oh, this is water, carbonated water with lemon.
Yeah.
And sugar, obviously, when I opened it. I'm like, so it's just like, you just got to accept that sometimes, there's going to be some communication. And of course, part of it's my Spanish, I'm sure. I'll give her credit, but maybe not. It's just enjoy it, because things are not going to make sense here. But they call it the land of magical surrealism. Is it magical surrealism?
Exactly. That was one of the slogans not so long ago. Now there's a country of beauty, which it really is. It's the people, it's the nature, the culture, the history. It has something for everybody. For me, there is no reason not to come here. If you want a vacation, it doesn't matter what you want to do. If you want to do those extreme sports, if you want to go bird watching, if you just want to hike in the mountains, go cycling, if you want to, anything you could possibly want to do in any country in the world, Colombia has it.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go elsewhere.
Plus the really cool stuff that, it seems like every day I see something, and honestly, the thought goes through my head is only in Colombia, and that's the guy driving the motorcycle with his wife on the back, holding the big screen TV, and he's got the dog on his lap and the toddler hanging on the back. And you're like, whoa.
Exactly.
Or I was in Manizales not too long ago, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm walking back to my room, and there's a guy walking down the street holding a porcelain toilet on his shoulder. The whole toilet, just walking down the street. You're like,
yeah.
Just seems so odd. But I love it. There was something I saw that, it's an interesting place, because you never know what you're going to see.
Exactly. Like here where I live, it's a small town, 12,000 people. And the school bus here is a Willis Jeep. Not just one, there's obviously many of them. So I love it. In the morning, we're walking our dogs, or afternoon, and you'll see the Willis Jeeps just packed full of kids in school uniforms, standing on the back, sitting on the roof. There's no.
It makes you smile, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it's just
I'm jealous that I didn't grow up in this culture. That's how I feel about that.
I wish I would have came here. Yeah, a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, because there's just so much to see and do, and why wait until it's, you're later in life. But anyway, we've talked a lot about that. Anything else about obviously you've got your website. We're going to have your website linked in the show notes. That's a great resource, so people can kind of get an idea of what you do, reach out to you. You mentioned a form on there. What should people expect if they go on your website, fill out the form? Will they then book a call with you guys, or what does that normally look like?
Couple of different things. We're actually going to go and, renovate the website a little bit in the future. not too far away, which is probably going to be that you know about AI, but AI getting added there. So it won't necessarily be the traditional form that we have there now, but it'll be the same sort of thing. You'll fill out the form. There's questions there. Tell us what you want, what you're interested in doing, how many people, what time you're thinking of going. And then we just pass it on to one of my experts. I've got like 4 at this point in time just now. It's always sort of going up and down, but 4 destination experts in Colombia who can help you do all the planning, everything from flights to hotels to everything you could possibly need to know here. So it's more or less how it is. The only other thing that we have now, we've started a new branch, which is called Incentive Travel Colombia. That's for, obviously, incentive trips, but also for MICE in general, meetings, congresses, events, for the corporate market. We've discovered that what we do now is sort of leaning into that as well. Mm-hmm. So when people need those team building experiences, we can provide that experience in Cartagena or wherever it may be, and then take them away on a 3 or 4 days into the wilderness sort of thing, where they can see the capybaras and alligators and wild horses, wild deer and foxes and everything. It's just a combination. It's just an ever-growing, ever-evolving business.
All right. Very, very cool. Wonderful. We've discussed a lot of things. I'll be honest, I probably spoke more than I normally do because I'm so excited about Colombia as well, and I want to share my stories. So thank you for going back and forth with me on that. It's such an easy place to discuss and share. So thank you for that. Bruce, is there anything I forgot to ask, should have asked, or anything else you want to make sure that our listeners know about either you, your business, Colombia, before we wrap up?
Yeah. I think so. Just check out the website. You'll find everything you need to know. We've got a great blog there. It's a great resource as well. I think we've got like 300 odd articles on there, a lot on almost anything you could want to know, whether it be on national parks or NGOs or different foods, different music, indigenous groups. If you're looking for information on Colombia, check out the blog. If it's not there, we know. We have the answer.
And so what I just heard is, even if you're not somebody that's going to use, a tour operator like yourself, it sounds like it's still a great resource of information. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so what it's there for. Yep. My goal isn't just to sell and to make money for my business. My goal is to share Colombia with the world. The more people who know about Colombia, the more people will come, the more people will love it. And hopefully the more the rest of the world will become like Colombia. Hopefully,
I love that.
That would be great.
Mic drop. Great place to wrap it up, Bruce. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. I'm happy that we bumped into each other a few weeks ago and had an opportunity to have this conversation. I look forward to collaborating on spreading the word on Colombia with you on future projects. So, Bruce, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, Jason. Great to be here.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.